Dare to be Great Incorporated goes the extra mile out of the great desire to live and produce at the highest and best levels. There is a mutual feeling of independent pride in the achievement of the team and in fulfilling the hopes and dreams of Glenn Turner and Terrell Jones. Also, there is no way to realize how much good will come from your going the extra mile. Going the extra mile brings unexpected returns. Years ago, an elderly lady strolled through the aisles of a Pittsburgh department store. The clerks noticed her and, supposing her to be just a looker, turned their backs when she stopped at their counter. Finally, she came to a counter where the young clerk bowed politely and asked if he might be of help. The lady told him no, that she was killing time, waiting for the rain to stop. At this, the young man brought a chair for her to rest in, and when the rain stopped, he escorted her to the door and bade her goodbye. As she left, she asked him for his card. Several months later, the owner of the store received a letter asking that the young man be sent to Scotland to take an order for furnishings for a home. The owner wrote back that he was sorry, but the young man did not work in that department. Back came the reply that no one else would do except this particular young man. So he was sent to Scotland and received an order for several $1,000s worth of household furnishings. The letters had come from Mr. Andrew Carnegie, and the elderly lady was Mr. Carnegie's mother. Later, the young man became the owner of a half interest in the store. Another phase of going the extra mile is the development it brings to your personal initiative. Our nation is built upon personal initiative. A young man observed that the hardware store where he worked had a lot of odds and ends that were out of date and were not selling. He rigged up a special table in the middle of the store, loaded it with some of the unsaleable merchandise, and marked it at a special price of $0.10 an article. To his surprise and that of the owner, the gadgets sold like hotcakes. Out of that experience grew the Woolworth 5 and 10 cent chain store system. The young man who went the extra mile was Frank W. Woolworth, and that idea yielded him a fortune estimated at more than $50 million. There is something about the habit of doing more than one is paid for which works in one's behalf. The habit of going the extra mile works as well for the employer as it does for the employee. Mr. Arthur Nash, whose business was merchant tailoring, found himself at the brink of financial ruin. His employees had sensed his spirit of defeatism, and they too became disgruntled and slowed down in their work. Nash came to the place where he knew something must be done. Recalling something he'd read in a magazine, he called his employees together. He told them what the situation was, then he told them about the magazine editor who had gone the extra mile by rendering service for which he accepted no pay, and suggested that he and his employees adopt that spirit of the extra mile and see if they could save the business. He promised his employees that if they would join him in this experiment, he would endeavor to carry on the business. They liked the idea and agreed to give it a trial. The next day they came in with their meager savings, which they voluntarily loaned Mr. Nash. Everyone went to work with a new spirit. Forgotten was any idea of pay and working hours. Everybody pitched in and gave of their best. Soon the business was picking up, and it was not long before it was back on a paying basis. Then it began to prosper as it had never done before. 10 years later, the business had made Mr. Nash rich. The employees were more prosperous than they had ever been, and everybody was happy. 6, let love motivate each act and attitude. Hate burns as much energy as hard work does in 8 hours. Hate is an attitude and spirit no one can afford. Love is the only power strong enough to move the will of man to his highest self and his most good. Former Senator Paul Douglas once attended a Quaker meeting where he learned a great lesson in handling criticism. Quakers practice silence in their worship. Sometimes they sit for a long time before anyone says anything. At this particular meeting, the only person who spoke was an old man who rose and made this statement. Whenever a man differs with you or criticizes you, try to show him by every look, by your demeanor, and by your actions that you love him. One of the most practical formulas ever outlined is found in Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. This is wonderful teaching when put into action, for it enables you to remain poised and confident in any situation. You will be the kind of person people like. This scripture verse is actually the most subtle technique ever devised for getting the love of everyone. One businessman carries a card which reads, "The way to happiness. Keep your heart free from hate, your mind from worry. Live simply, expect little, give much. Fill your life with love, scatter sunshine. Forget self. Think of others. Do as you would be done by." Try this for a week and you'll be surprised. 7. Live above petty criticism. Mrs. Zadie Bunker of California was a remarkable lady of over 60 when she decided she wanted to be a licensed pilot. She studied, practiced, and got her license. She was known as the flying great-grandmother. Mrs. Bunker said that when things got on her nerves, she would take her plane up into the air, and right away everything seemed different. Not many of us have our own planes to escape from the irritations of the world, but we can have altitude in mind and spirit. We can stay on top of things. When people insult you, a good thing to do is to ask, who insulted you that caused you to repeat the insult? 8. Desire the best for those who take advantage of you. A businessman in upstate New York was having a terrible time making ends meet. His store was in a rundown condition. It was drab and dark and unattractive. Merchandise lay in disordered piles around the tables and countertops. The owner was as bleak and downhearted in appearance as was the store. One day an old friend who was concerned about him came in to see him. When he remarked about the state of the store, the owner told him he didn't have the money to freshen it up because he couldn't collect the money that was owed him. The friend was challenged to help, and together they went over a list of some 96 customers who were indebted to him. The friend suggested that the storekeeper become interested in his customers, find out their needs and problems, and when he sent a bill, to write a personal message on the statement. He also told the storekeeper to say a prayer for the person who would be receiving it, not a prayer for the money, but that the person would have a happy and prosperous use of the clothing he had bought. He reminded the owner that he should think of his customers as people and not just as sales. The owner was not sure about this unbusinesslike approach, but he was in such desperate straits he was willing to try anything. To his surprise, the results were amazing. Of the 96 people, over half replied promptly or in part. The others indicated their payments would be forthcoming. Some even came into the store to pay their bill. The storekeeper was so impressed with the experiment, he doubled his efforts. His philosophy of business changed, and he became a popular and well-liked member of the community. 9. Recognize the importance of everyone you meet. Sometimes the people you meet casually need understanding and love more than your friends. Everybody is somebody in God's sight. The more you have this attitude, the greater assistance you bring to others, and the larger the delight in your life. Dr. Samuel Shoemaker wrote a story about Ralston Young, who became famous as Redcap number 42 in the Grand Central Station in New York. He carried bags for a living, but his main job was living in God's Spirit. As he carried a person's suitcase, he tried to share a religious fellowship with him. He was sensitive to the needs of those he came in contact with and tried to find ways to be of special help. One day, he was asked to take a little old lady in a wheelchair to her train. As he wheeled her into the elevator, he noticed there were tears in her eyes. Ralston closed his eyes and asked the Lord how he could help her. As they left the elevator, he smiled at her and complimented her on her pretty hat. Then he went on to mention how nice she looked in the dress she had on. At this, the lady's countenance brightened, and she asked Young why he had said such nice things to her. He told her he had noticed her tears and that he had asked the Lord how he could be of help. He said the Lord had told him to speak to her about her hat, but that the mention of her dress was his own idea. And then Mr. Young asked her how she felt. She told him she was in constant pain and that sometimes she felt she just couldn't stand it. She asked Young if he knew what it was like to be in pain all the time. He replied that he had lost an eye, and it hurt like a hot iron day and night. The lady questioned Young as to how he accomplished his apparent happiness. The answer he gave was prayer. He told her it did not remove the pain, but it did give strength to bear it, so that it seemed not to hurt so much. A year went by, and one night Ralston Young was paged and told to come to the information booth. A young woman was there who told him she was the daughter of the woman he had helped. Her mother had died, but before her death, she had told her daughter to find the Redcap and tell him how much he had encouraged her. Then the daughter began weeping. At this, Young began to console her and remind her how thankful she should be that she had had her mother as long as she had, that her mother would always be near her, and that she would see her again. The sobs ended and the tears dried. And so this man, with his compassionate heart, was able to help the daughter as he had her mother. 10. Believe there is a way to achieve the best results. Hugh Fullerton was a famous sports writer many years ago. One story he wrote concerned Josh O'Reilly, one-time manager of the San Antonio club of the Texas League. O'Reilly had a roster of great players, 7 of whom had been hitting over 300. There was no doubt in anyone's mind but what this team would win the championship. But the club fell into a slump and lost 17 of their first 20 games. The players couldn't hit or do anything right. They began to accuse each other of being a jinx to the team. The team played the Dallas club, a poor team that year, and only the San Antonio pitcher got a hit. They were badly beaten. In the clubhouse after the game, O'Reilly saw what a discouraged group his team was. He became aware that the team expected to lose. Their trouble was they were thinking defeat instead of possibility thinking. This negative attitude caused them to freeze up, and they were just not able to play. It so happened that at the same time there was a popular preacher named Schlater in the neighborhood. This man claimed to be a faith healer and was apparently having some amazing results. Great crowds came to hear him, and people had confidence in him. O'Reilly asked each player to give him 2 of their bats. He left, telling the members to stay in the clubhouse until he returned. When he returned, he gave the players their bats and told them they'd been blessed by Schlater and contained a power they could not overcome. The players were amazed but elated. The next day they won a decisive victory over Dallas and went on to win the championship. Fullerton said that for years a Schlater bat was a prized possession. Regardless of Schlater's power, something tremendous happened in the minds of the players. They began to think in terms of winning instead of losing. They expected to win and had the power to get what they wanted. A major key to success is to give it all you've got. A famous athletic coach once said that the trouble with most people, athletes as well as non-athletes, is that they always hold something in reserve. A trapeze artist was instructing students how to perform on the trapeze bar. After giving full explanation in this skill, he told them to demonstrate their ability. One student, looking up at the perch on which he would perform, was suddenly filled with fear. He froze completely and gasped, "I can't do it." The instructor put his arms around the boy's shoulder and said, "Son, you can do it, and I'll tell you how. Throw your heart over the bar, and your body will follow." Psychologists have learned through studies that people spend most of their time thinking about themselves. Yet life's real growth comes when we think of others and how to relate to them. The art of human relations is the result of a heartfelt concern for others, which is able to express itself in a persuasive personality tempered with grace and humility, and in a human persuasion free of irritation and confusion. How to get along better with people, how to tactfully influence people. In his matchless book, The Power of Positive Thinking, Norman Vincent Peale has given us 10 principles of getting people to like us. I believe that you will achieve much by practicing these principles. 1. Learn to remember names. Inefficiency at this point indicates that your interest is not sufficiently outgoing. A man's name is very important to him. Repeat his name in the process of conversation. Write it down as soon as you can, and you will learn to remember it. 2. Be a comfortable person so that there is no strain in being with you. Be an old shoe or an old hat kind of individual. Be homey. Be easy to get along with. 3. Acquire the quality of easygoingness so that things don't ruffle you. Learn to make your own circumstances. Don't let other situations tear you apart. 4. Don't be egotistical. Guard against giving the impression that you know it all. Be natural and normally humble. 5. Cultivate the quality of being interesting so that people will want to be with you and get something of stimulating value from their association with you. Talk with detail and concrete examples so that people will enjoy your companionship. 6. Study to get the scratchy elements out of your personality, even those of which you may be unconscious. Be alertly aware of little irritating points in your personality. 7. Sincerely attempt to heal on an honest basis every misunderstanding you have had or now have. Drain off your grievances. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath or your anger or your conflict. Life is too short to be unhappy. 8. Practice liking people until you learn to do so genuinely. Remember what Will Rogers said, "I never met a man I didn't like." Try to be that way. 9. Never miss an opportunity to say a word of congratulations upon anyone's achievement. Express sympathy and sorrow or disappointment. 10. Get a deep spiritual experience so that you have something to give people that will help them to be stronger and able to meet life more effectively. Give strength to people, and they will give attention to you. Aren't these 10 wonderful principles? You will find on page 200 in Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking these principles. If you don't have that book, you need it. Everybody needs it. It will bless your life. Simmons has said, "A quick and sound judgment, a good common sense, kind feelings, and instinctive perception of character. In these are the elements of what is called tact, which has so much to do with acceptability and success in life." Steed has said, "I've known some men possessed of good qualities which were very serviceable to others, but useless to themselves, like a sundial in front of a house to inform others, but not the owner within." Wilde said, "To have the reputation of possessing the most perfect social tact, talk to every woman as if you loved her, and to every man as if he bored you." Tactfulness will open many doors of outstanding achievement. Practice it, and you will be a happier person. Give, listen, understand. Go the extra mile.